Can Israel kill its way to peace? That's a really uncomfortable question, but it is vitally important that we examine those situations or we examine that question. And as we consider what should the United States do to help Israel, how far should we go? Those are critically important questions because if Israel can kill its way to war, to peace, then the path they're on might be a good one. It might be a reasonable one. If they can't kill their way to peace, then we're going to have some trouble. Now, today is day 43 in their Israeli war against Hamas. They've been fighting since October the 7th, and fighting right now is continuing on in the Al Shifa hospital, which has been in the news lately. Gary, if we could bring that map up so people can see right there on that left map, you can see the Al Shifa hospital there is basically in the center on the left side on the coastline of Gaza, and Israeli forces have been clearing now continue to clear that entire compound. It's not just one single building, and in many of the buildings they're having to go floor by floor, room by room to clear all those, and that's obviously continuing to cause a great deal of friction with governments around the world, both Arab and Western nations, as the casualty count, especially in such a sensitive place, keeps going up. But that's not the only place that fighting's going on. There's continuing to be airstrikes around the rest of the Gaza Strip, and now even going into some of the southern parts of it. But here's some key questions that we have to ask. What is Netanyahu's actual objective here? What is his political objective? What is his military objective? What is Hamas doing? What is Hamas trying to accomplish? What do the Palestinian people think? How can this situation be resolved? As bad as it's been in the decades prior to this, and even in this past summer when things got up to a fever pitch, none of that is comparison to the amount of angst and anger and violence that's going on right now. So the question is, how can Israel get to peace? Now, Netanyahu in the last few days has gone on American televisions and talked about what his political and his military objectives are. And then Hamas has also kind of countered that and said what their views are. Let's take a look at those in sequence. First of all, here's Netanyahu's political objectives.
The U.S. also says that any post-war plan for Gaza must include Palestinian-led governance and Gaza unified with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. You appeared to reject that yesterday. You said Israel will not accept a, quote, civilian authority there that educates its children to hate Israel. So I just want to be clear. Are you saying that Israel would not accept giving control of Gaza over to the Palestinian Authority after the war?
First thing we have to do is destroy Hamas, because otherwise they'll do it again and again and again, and they've said so. So we'll destroy Hamas. The second thing we have to understand is that there has to be an overriding and overreaching Israeli military envelope, because we've seen any place that we leave, we just, exit, give it to some other force. Very soon terrorism resurges, so we've achieved nothing. The third thing we have to understand is that a civilian authority has to cooperate in two goals. One is to demilitarize Gaza, and the second is to de-radicalize Gaza. There has to be a reconstructed civilian authority. There has to be something else. Otherwise, we're just falling into that same rabbit hole, and we're going to have the same result. Remember, the PA was already in Gaza. When Israel left Gaza, it handed the keys over to the PA. And what happened? Within a very short time, Hamas took over, kicked them out. They weren't willing to fight Hamas. They're still not willing to fight Hamas. So you have to have some kind of authority, civilian Palestinian authority, that is willing to fight the terrorists and educating, and importantly, must educate their children for a future of peace, cooperation, prosperity, cooperation with Israel, not the annihilation of Israel.
So, yes, on the surface of it, certainly to a Western audience, that sounds perfectly reasonable. According to Netanyahu, the way he's characterizing this, look, we tried to be peaceful with Gaza. We handed them the keys. We told the Palestinian Authority that they could have it and they could govern themselves. And instead, they resort to terrorism, as though there were no antecedents for that. There was no reason for that. It's just, he's implying that it's just in their nature to be violent. And so now then we have to go and kill them all to do that. So that's what his political objectives are. And he wants, he said the words he used is peace toward the end. That's for Israel. And he claims also for the Palestinian people, if they'll just do what Israel tells them to do. That's his entry position. That's his objective politically. Here's his objective militarily.
Mr. Prime Minister, can you tell us, how will you know when you have achieved your objective, and how close are you to that goal?
We've set a specific target, that is to destroy Hamas's military capabilities and to destroy its governance capabilities over the 2 million people that it holds hostage in Gaza. That is something that we are achieving step by step, and I assure you we'll complete the task. If you want peace, destroy Hamas. If you want security, destroy Hamas. If you want a future for Israel, the Palestinians, the Middle East, destroy Hamas.
So if our operational question is, can you kill your way to peace? Netanyahu seems to be saying, yeah, we can. And that's exactly what we're going to do. That is our objective. So he has set Israel on a course that their path to peace for its own self, for its own population, is to kill Hamas and destroy it as an operational military and political entity. Now, let's see what the other side views that as and how they respond to this. Now, both of those clips from Netanyahu on CNN and NBC were made on the 12th of November. About 4 days later, here's what the view was coming in out of the Palestinian side.
Hamas says the war is far from over, and the group will fight attempts to allow President Mahmoud Abbas regain control of the territory.
We tell the American administration and the leaders of the occupation, Gaza will only be governed by its people. There will be no political or security authority except for the Palestinians there. We are a free people who do not accept guardianship from anyone, and our blood and our lives will be the price for our freedom and of our dignity.
Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas faces a delicate task. If he agrees to a deal with Israel during the war, Palestinians will see it as an act of betrayal.
If we are to focus on the future and be convinced that Netanyahu's war is not only on Gaza, it is on the West Bank as well. So he'll finish with Gaza, turn to the West Bank. His concept is the total displacement of Palestinians, is the eradication of Palestinian identity.
So you see, the Palestinians view things very differently. And in that terms of that Hamas leader, just like Netanyahu was ignoring a whole categories of things, he also, the Hamas leader, was ignoring whole categories. He's talking as though October 7th never happened. Like they're just sitting around there and all of a sudden they're being invaded for no reason by Israel. And so they're just going to keep fighting and they're looking for, their own freedom and their own peace and all that. It's just everybody's kind of looking at this from a very jaded position from their side and ignoring the other side and demonizing the other side. This is the nature of war. That can't be too surprising. But the question for the United States is, and the question for the Israeli population is, can they get to peace using the military arm? Now, look, there has been a lot of fighting so far. Like I said, this is day 43 so far. Gary, if you can bring that map back up there. The map on the left is kind of showing the current fight and how Israeli Defense Forces have now completely surrounded the majority of the Gaza Strip. Of Gaza City. And they're going to now probably start methodically squeezing through section by section of that city and sometimes building by building to completely eliminate any of the Hamas people. But now then look on the map on the right and you see that red boxed in area. That's what lies to the south. So right now in the northern part, Israel had moved somewhere around 1 million people out of that because that was one of the more densely populated areas. Now they're all squished into that bottom state. And of course, you got to imagine that there were already some existing military brigades, Hamas brigades operating in the south. That's from the beginning. Now then, it's substantially more high concentration of civilian population, but also it's almost certain that many of the people who fled from the north to the south actually were Hamas fighters. So now there's more of them in the south. So once Israel finishes clearing that north, however long that may take, and probably in a best case scenario, that's still many weeks away before they could clear that many buildings because it's a very laborious, time consuming operation. Then they're going to move into the south. Now, if you've seen all of the angst and the challenges and the anger that this war has created so far in the Arab world and in the Western world with protests in major cities all across the Western world, it's going to only get worse as they continue to move south where the population density is higher. Now, where can you tell those people to go? Now, you told all of them to get out of the north so that you could fight here. Now then, according to recent reports I read just earlier today, now then the Israeli Defense Forces is telling people to move from one side of that portion to another. I don't know where that they're going to end up going there. And so you can see there's just fewer and fewer places to flee, and Israel's continuing to methodically try and move through to destroy that. But can they succeed? Is it even theoretically possible to kill your way to a victory, to kill enough of the bad guys in a situation like this, where you have a very densely packed civilian population into which is mixed lots of military people? Now, from our own personal experience, that answer is no. So we tried for 20 years to kill our way to victory in Afghanistan. We tried year after year. We tried massive numbers of forces. We tried medium numbers of forces. We tried smaller numbers of forces to rely on local militants to try and help us go after the bad guys. None of it worked. We were not willing to make any kind of negotiated settlement, no kind of power sharing deal with the Taliban. We only wanted their submission or their conclusion into the Afghan government, basically surrender. That was the option that we gave the Taliban. And what result did it have? Not only did they never submit to that, they continued to fight, because for them it was an existential struggle. So they continued to fight, and they continued to wage war against the U.S.-led coalition and against the Afghan government, until finally we got tired of the fight and we could see it was never going to be successful. And then we brought it to a very clumsy and bad end, but it was something that was necessary. 2 full decades of trying to do the unattainable, of trying to give the military a militarily unattainable objective, telling it to bring peace to Afghanistan, which is what our political leaders said year after year after year. And it was always a myth. It was never going to happen. But we wanted it to happen. We wanted it to be able to do that. We wanted to say, hey, this is like World War II. We defeated the Nazi armies and bam, there's peace. We brought peace to the whole continent. It doesn't work like that way in an insurgent level army, especially when the fighters can blend into the civil population. You just can't do it that way. It's almost never worked, because just consider the problem for the Israelis now as they move into that southern part. Once they finish with the northern part here, how are they going to distinguish between an angry man who's mad that his family has been killed or that his house has been destroyed and an actual Hamas fighter? How can they distinguish that? Because I can assure you from personal experience, every time the Israeli Defense Forces kill somebody who wasn't Hamas, who didn't like them, didn't vote for them, had no interest in them, but they were trapped in the Gaza Strip, when Israeli bombs kill them and their families, they're going to go after the Israeli Defense Forces when they come in. They're going to defend their land, their people, their honor, and their dignity. That's just what people do. It's what everybody. It's what the Americans did in the American Civil War and in the American Revolutionary War, and of course both sides of the Civil War for that matter. They were fighting for what was right to them. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. We found all kinds of problems and faults with the Taliban in their view. We found all kinds of faults with the Hamas people. Many faults. I personally abhor what Hamas has done and how they have chosen to respond to this situation. But the fact of the matter is, they on their side are committed to the death to this. If Israel, therefore, continues to say, no, we're going to fight and we're going to use military force until we succeed, all they're going to end up doing, the most likely outcome, is that they're going to create far more anger and far more desire among these Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Christians to actually seek revenge in the future. It will not accomplish the end for what it did. Now, the one partial success that the United States did have was in Iraq. And it wasn't because what the popular narrative is that Petraeus came in with a big surge and militarily conquered the area and pacified the Islamic fighters there. That's not what happened. I don't know if many people are aware of this, but I can assure you that's definitely not what happened. I've written on this many times and detailed exactly what did happen. And that was that the Al-Qaeda in Iraq overplayed its hand and went against the Iraqi insurgents. And so they were fighting an existential battle. The Iraqi insurgents said, we're not interested in a global jihad. We just want our country back. So they actually had a tactical cooperation with the United States and said, hey, we'll help you go after our mutual enemy of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and quell them. To his credit, David Petraeus recognized that and he said, hey, if we can get you on our side and we can actually help, fund your group and give you guys a hope and some kind of political freedoms, then we can end the war outright. And that's exactly what happened, because Petraeus was willing to say, hey, we're going to kill the people who were going against us that we have mutual against, And then, hey, we're actually going to work with the Maliki government at the time, the Shia government, to say, hey, you need to give more freedoms and more rights and protections to the Sunni population, so everybody can work together and everybody has a common goal to their country. Now, that's what ended up happening. That's why the violence went all the way down and why the United States was able to finally leave in 2011. That's exactly what, but only because we were willing to say we're not going to try to kill our way out of the Sunni insurgency. And of course, the Iraqi government ruined what they had. And as soon as we left, Maliki turned against the Sunnis, and that flared back up and turned into ISIS, which is still a thorn in the side of Baghdad to this day. But that's a separate issue for another day. What matters here for Israel is, I'm just telling you, if they stick with what Netanyahu says he's trying to do now, to just continue to wipe out 2/3 of the infrastructure, the civil infrastructure within the Gaza Strip, so these people won't even have anywhere to live. And it will take many, many years to rebuild, even once the fighting's done. If he continues on and does that to the entire Gaza Strip, he is going to have so much more anger. And there's no guarantee that he will even be able to finish that military task, because I don't know that he's going to continue to maintain support from the West. You see, it's already fraying at the edges because of so many people are upset about these horrible images of all of the civilian people who are dying on a daily basis, now way above 10,000. It's only going to increase as you get into more compacted areas. You see, it can't help but do that. The more bombs fall, the higher the density of civilians, the more of them are going to be killed. I mean, it's just the way, the laws of nature. That's going to happen. The Arab regimes too. We don't know how much pressure there's going to continue to be on Hezbollah, for example. Many people are already in the Arab world are putting lots of pressure on them already, on Nasrallah, to launch a second wave into the northern part of the Israeli Defense Forces to give them a two-front war. There's already pressure on them. Don't know how long that's going to be able to resist. Maybe they continue to. Maybe the threat of Israel against Lebanon and against Beirut is going to keep them deterred. I don't know. I certainly hope so. Don't want to see Israel have to face a second front. I don't want to see the people of Beirut have to become, part of this war. And I certainly don't want to see it expand to anywhere else. It is absolutely in everyone's interest to keep this contained. But folks, if we're going to avoid those negative outcomes, if we're going to minimize and mitigate the risk of expansion of the war, and if we're actually going to look for a way to get to peace, there's going to have to be some accommodation, some political accommodation, and people, however much they hate each other now, are going to have to find a way to work together. And that's going to mean that Israel's going to have to do something it's not going to want to do. That means the Palestinians are going to have to do some things they don't want to do. Nobody's going to be happy with the end result. But if we don't even try, then the chance of this thing blowing up even larger will grow by the week. As the further this thing goes along, the more danger there's going to be. That's all we have for you today on the deep dive, because that's where we are on day 43 of this war. But we are committed to continuing to watch this day by day and to bring you the context that's so often lacking in the major media when people are talking, because it's either from one side or the other. We give you the comprehensive context because we are absolutely unintimidated and we are uncompromised on the truth. We're going to continue to give it to you every day here at Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Be sure to like and subscribe and pass this on to anybody else who also wants the truth. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Deep Dive.